Good day to you. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show live. I'm joined by my colleague and friend of many years, Bill Raggio, the Senior Fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. We address the chaos that is war making in the 21st century. To touch upon the headlines that are pressing, I begin in London. G7 to discuss joint release of emergency oil reserves. Middle East war has triggered surge in crude prices. I believe Brent touched 104 and moving yesterday per barrel. It goes on to say that this threatens global economy. I would say we're beyond threat right now. We can see it in the gas pumps. Wherever you are, you'll see unusual and unpredictable leaps in the price of a gallon of gasoline because there's no way to track this easily. The headlines continue. Stocks and bonds tumble as oil soars past $100 per barrel. We are joined from the Middle East by our friend Hussein Haqqani, former ambassador from Pakistan to the United States, and he's now a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. All of this will follow in due train. I'm going to get through the headlines as best I can, given the chaos of the moment. All of this is important to take into account because it's a moving story. There's no one set of headlines that describe the scale. For example, Bloomberg, this is the American edition, Iran war shakes global markets as oil passes $100. That was yesterday afternoon, East Coast time, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. 110 oil, a longer war is here for markets, predicts John Authers, the distinguished op-ed writer at the Bloomberg. Stagflation trades sweep markets as Trump signals widening war. Also, Saudi Arabia starts oil cuts as Hormuz closure fills storage. That refers to the Hormuz Strait. Comes back to geography. There's no way to talk about this unless you look at a map and understand there is a choke point of choke points. We go to the Wall Street Journal. This is greeting the traders and bank chieftains right now. As oil surges past $100, the long-feared Gulf squeeze is here. Long-feared, apparently, but not long enough to plan for it because it's upon us just the tumble down the stairs way we could have imagined beforehand. Stock futures slide as oil hits highest price since 2022. That was the pandemic price. Goes on to say Trump comes under pressure to address gas prices, Iran war strategy. Trump comes under pressure. There's an understatement. Iraq becomes battleground for U.S. forces once again. And then the Wall Street Journal asks in a headline, when is a war not a war? All worthy issues. There are days for the op-ed pages to address all of these themes. I emphasize right now, this is a war. The first three reports are wrong, guaranteed. I've added a coda to this here in the 21st century. The next three reports are information warfare. Ask yourself, why am I being told this? That's an important question. You don't have to have the answer, but ask the question, why am I learning this now? Bill and Hussein, a very good morning to you. Mr. Ambassador, I'm eager to hear your thoughts because last week what we had was chaos. That's an understatement for this week. Chaos is an inadequate word. It's not long enough. So I hope you hear me and we'll begin immediately. What are your thoughts, Mr. Ambassador, watching not only the subcontinent and all of the Indian Ocean basin, but the Mediterranean basin, the Atlantic basin, the whole world is now gripped in watching that price of oil. Good day to you, Hussein. Not yet, Bill. I thought there was a loose connection. We'll turn. Let's see if I can get him back with one click. Hussein, I'm not hearing you. Not yet. I see the link, Bill, but it's
okay. Can you hear me?
now I can. Mr. Ambassador, we're just getting ready to record, so I wanted your first thoughts before we start recording. I've been reading headlines from London and New York, and they're predictably all keyed on the fact that oil is climbing. What are your thoughts over the weekend, Mr. I
think we might have lost them again, John.
Yes, It comes and goes. Well, that's why this is the making of the John Batchelor show. We're making it up. Until we get him back, Bill, what are your thoughts over the weekend? Did you see anything out of step or unusual or something you hadn't anticipated?
No, nothing I haven't anticipated. The oil prices, I think this was inevitable, and I think this is really part of Iran's strategy. Make this war as painful for the West as possible. Get if the price of oil's up, it's going to cause business. It's going to cause Americans to demand lower prices and seek a quicker end to the war. A quicker end to the war would ensure the survival of the Iranian regime. No matter how battered, bruised, and beaten it may be, if it can walk away from this still holding the levers of power, no matter how tenuous that hold is, that's a victory for Iran.
Mr. Ambassador, I see you're seeking to link to us. How do you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, don't worry about the video. It's not holding this morning, so your presence is most approved. So here we are. Your thoughts, Bill and I. We're going to record in just a moment, but I wanted your first thoughts over the weekend. Did you see anything out of step with what we could have anticipated from this level of violence?
I think that most of it could have been anticipated, but I have a suspicion that the President of the United States did not anticipate it all, because if he had, he would have prepared for some of it. For example, bolstering oil reserves ahead of something like this would have mitigated some of the pressure. And it wouldn't have done away with it. Secondly, I don't think that he calculated the response of the Iranians in the region and the region's response to the Iranians. Nobody is willing to take up the fight. So it is still the US and Israel only. And that, I think, is also something that probably was not calculated right. It was assumed that if the Iranians try to do something to Saudi Arabia and the other neighbors, they will probably hit back in conjunction with the American side, which none of them are willing to do.
Wonderful. Wonderful in that is comprehensive op-ed material. Thank you, Hussein. Wonderful. Okay, FT, you've got your assignment. Come back to me tomorrow with the answers that you can find. Oh, gentlemen, we're going to begin immediately because the war is pressing us. I believe we'll just hang on to that past $100 a barrel headline. We don't know where it's going to settle. We can't tell. The markets are moving too fast.
110.
You see 110. I know on Friday they were talking 150, which I thought was a science fiction number. I no longer believe that is accurate.
It came close to 120 for a little while, but now it's at 110.
This is traders anticipating what cannot be anticipated, which is the the casus belli. That's the cause of the war aims, the mission package, the scale. None of that has been clarified by the combatants. That would be Washington and Jerusalem. So we will begin immediately. Thank you. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. 5, 4, which is Carrot Soup, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining. This is live. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. I welcome my colleagues, Bill Raggio, Senior Fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He keeps the Long War Journal with his colleagues, and Ambassador Hussein Haqqani, former ambassador from Pakistan to the United States, now a Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. We're observing the moving story of the war in the Middle East one more time. However, the headlines from London and New York and Washington all tell a story of threat. For example, the Financial Times, the pink sheet from London. G7 to discuss joint release of emergency oil reserves. Middle East war has triggered surge in crude prices that threatens the global economy. More than threatens, it's damaging it as I speak. Goes on to write, this is FT, stocks and bonds tumble as oil soars past $100 a barrel. That is London talking. I go to New York, Wall Street Journal, similar direction. As oil surges past $100, the long-feared Gulf squeeze is here. Long-feared, but we didn't anticipate. That's a pleasure to solve that puzzle. And Trump comes under pressure to address gas prices, Iran war strategy. This is an understatement for the Wall Street Journal. Finally, Bloomberg, which I find global in its reporting. In other words, it checks in with Asia and the Middle East and Europe and the United States before it shapes its headlines. Iran war shakes global markets as oil passes $100. Saudi Arabia starts oil cuts as Hormuz closure fills storage. Mr. Ambassador, I begin with your thoughts about what I've just read through. Every one of those headlines was a scare headlines once upon a time back in 2013, 2014, 2015, when the Obama administration was negotiating what became the JCPOA, saying the alternative is war, and what that quickly said to me back in 2014, 2015 was war would include a global damage to the economy. That means the least of us are being damaged right now. People who have no place in the world of making decisions about war making. The children of the continents are being damaged right now. What are your thoughts, Mr. Ambassador, over the weekend? And what have you seen that surprises you? Good day to you, USA.
Good day. Look, the president said 4 or 5 different things last weekend. One of them was this will be over in 2, 3 days. It isn't over in 2, 3 days. The next he said 2, 3 weeks. Well, let's see if that pans out. The regime in Iran hasn't changed, and there's no sign that it is changing. If anything, they have elected the son of the former supreme leader Ali Khamenei. They have elected Mujtaba Khamenei, who is not a religious scholar of high standing, just like his father wasn't when he was named supreme leader, but his father was an astute politician. So we don't know if he is going to be as astute, but apparently he has a lot of control over the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which the Israelis insist they are destroying, but which does not seem completely in disarray, sufficiently strong to let their person become the supreme leader. And the very fact that they've appointed him is also an act of defiance. So the regime is not collapsing right now, but the global oil market and the stock markets are being affected. From Iran's point of view, that's not a very bad outcome, at least at this moment. No one expected them to do well in a war. They don't have the best of militaries in the best of times, and this is not the best of times. From their point of view, if they are still standing in 2 to 3 weeks when everybody else is exhausted from the economic consequences of the war, they will have done well. So I am still left with the question, what really do we want achieved, and how long will it take for us to achieve that? And once we've achieved it, what's the next move? Because the impact on the oil markets and the global markets is going to last much longer than this war.
Bill, a very good day to you. A sharp distinction made between our experiences in the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war, in that the global markets were not badly damaged after the first few hours of anxiety in the Iraq conflict. However, right now, this looks to be a larger damage to the world markets than it does right now to either combatant in the region. What are your thoughts, Bill? What is unusual here? What are you watching at Long War Journal?
Hello, John. Hello, Hussein. Look, I'm not surprised that oil prices are rising. I don't think the administration was ignorant to the fact. Whether they prepared for this or not, that certainly is a good question. This was inevitable that you go to war with one of the world's largest oil producers, and which can impact the ability of the travel of the maritime shipping of the oil tankers that are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. You had to expect that there was going to be an impact on the price of a barrel of oil. That as far as Khamenei's son being appointed, I agree with Hussein, not just an act of defiance, but he has been considered one of Khamenei's successors for some time. We've been looking at him as being a possible successor. Once the Hamas launched its attack on Israel, right? And then Israel went to war with Iran during the 12-day war last summer. So that isn't surprising. I think Iran's play here is to do exactly what we're talking about. Boost that price of oil, cause concern from Western citizens, from businessmen, panic within the government, pressure the Trump administration and the war. If you want stable oil prices over time, if you want us to ensure that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons and creates ballistic missiles, this regime needs to go. But I'm not certain that there's a good plan for this. I don't see a resistance on the ground forming. I don't believe these types of operations can be done via air. Look at how Saddam Hussein in the 90s, all the way up till his ouster in 2003, stood up to the U.S., to a Western coalition with sanctions, with military operations on a near daily basis, enforcing a no-fly zone, et cetera, et cetera. So if the Trump administration wants to get this done, they need to figure out how to overthrow this regime. That is what needs to happen. Much easier said than done.
Mr. Ambassador, it has been written several times over these last days that the administration assumed something like Caracas when it launched its legions against Tehran. That would mean a decap that leads to retreat and obedience by what remains of the leadership, and a transition at some point, this is theoretical in Caracas as well, to an acceptable democracy that trades according to the intelligence reports of the United States. That is not anywhere discussed today, but that was said to be the anticipation of the Trump administration. Is that an adequate explanation for the poor planning about the price of oil right now, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, most people in the Trump administration have not shown us a remarkable knowledge of global history. Many of them don't seem to know American history either. They're good businessmen. The president himself knows how to make money for himself and his family. Does not necessarily know the history of Iran or the people of Iran or the prophecies that guide the Shia Muslims, just as evangelical Christians are guided by some of their prophecies. So none of them was probably taken into account. And I can see a bigger problem down the road, which is another Shia awakening. And the reason for that is very simple. Killing Khamenei has made him into a martyr. He was an 86-year-old. He could have died in bed, and there could have been succession. But by killing him, he has become a martyr. Martyrdom has a very important place in Shia theology. Some people already have started thinking about, okay, what does this mean for the end times, etc., etc. So just as some American military units were recently told that this is the battle before Armageddon, I'm sure that there are people in the IRGC who really believe. Now, when people really believe something, they fight for it very differently from when their belief is in logic and nationalism, etc., etc. So I am concerned about that dimension, and I think that that was what was not taken into account. For example, this totally senseless to us raining of rockets and missiles on all the region. In their way of thinking, maybe that is part of increasing the pressure, even losing the war, but lose the war for something bigger which will come down the road. And that really unsettles me because it makes me wonder how long the United States, which was hoping to and talking about getting out of being the world's policeman, will end up having to police the Middle East. And even in case of Iran, will we end up having to pay the price of rebuilding it if we destroy it? Can our economy sustain that? Do we really want to do it? And if we don't do it, who will? And if nobody does, then will we have a Shia Somalia sitting over a major oil reserve? a place which we have deserted after destroying it, and where nobody really runs matters in a methodical way. So, all of those things I think were not thought through. That's my impression.
Hussein Haqqani, former ambassador from Pakistan to the United States. Bill Rajo, senior fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. When we come back, I'll ask Bill about something that was mentioned in headlines over the weekend. I don't see it in a headline this morning. The metaphor is boots on the ground. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my good colleagues Bill Rajo and Hussein Haqqani, measuring what we can of the fog of war. The first three reports are wrong, and these days, because of AI, the next three reports are information warfare. That is, used to be called propaganda. Now it's a weapon. But we go to a metaphor that has been used repeatedly over these last days, as in, I don't see it, or we have to entertain it, or everything's on the table. Boots on the ground. Bill, I come to you because you wore those boots once upon a time active, and you've worn them as a reporter as well. The idea of putting anything that looks like a division into Iran strikes me as fantasy and delirious and just ignorant. How does it strike you, Bill?
Yeah, I would agree with all of those descriptions, John. Not because we couldn't do it, not because it couldn't be effective, but because there's zero political support here. I loathe to look at politics and analyze politics, but you basically have half the Republican Party that doesn't agree with this war. And, let's go over and look at the Democrats. There's not a lot of support as well. Keep in mind that when we went into Afghanistan, went to war in Afghanistan, you had a 90% approval rating. I don't remember what it was in Iraq, but I recall it being well over
70.
Yeah, well over 70, right? And look at how political support deteriorated over time. The reality is that, look, first of all, I've said this a million times, air power is not going to win wars. It's difficult to remove a regime. If it was so easy to do, why hasn't Israel done this in Lebanon with Hezbollah? It's a country of like 5-6 million. If air power was so effective in changing regimes, Hezbollah as an entity should not exist any longer, and yet it persists. And if we believe that air power can be used in Iran to do this with a country of 70 million and the resources that outstrip Hezbollah by, several degrees of magnitude, then you just haven't been paying attention. I do want to comment on one thing that Hussein said, about this administration not understanding history and U.S. and global history. I don't think there's been an administration that really has understood this since the Reagan administration. So this is just, to me, par for the course. Look at all of
I
our
agree with that, by the way.
Please go ahead, Hussein.
I said I agree with that. I agree that since the Reagan administration, American leaders have planned wars and gotten into conflicts without recognizing whatever other historical and regional forces are at play. Remember when President George W. Bush said, "Oh, I didn't even know that there were Shias and Sunnis in Iraqis. I thought there were only Iraqis." So not knowing the granular detail of the place you're going to does create a lot of problems. And I think that those problems have come back to bite us in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now they'll come to bite us in Iran.
Mr. Ambassador, how should we read the reports from Saudi Arabia that they're in back channel or front channel or note communication with Tehran? What is the ambition of, if that's accurate, what is MBS looking for by communicating to Tehran?
I think that MBS would like Saudi Arabia to be left alone and would like to be the last standing sort of major oil producer unaffected at all by this conflict in return for not supporting any major on-ground effort to dislodge the regime. Remember, if ground troops are to be inducted, then the neighborhood becomes important. Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, those are the four major bordering countries of Iraq. Look at the map. Air bases in Saudi Arabia are important to support a ground invasion. And he seems to be willing to hint to the Iranians that look, you and us, we've had a long-standing conflict, going back to the Persian-Arab conflict of 2,000 years ago. But let's forget about that for the moment. Um, we are not going to be part of your regime change operation, and you should not be part of any attempt to make life difficult for us, hit our infrastructure, or cause problems for us in the next phase.
Hussein Haqqani, former ambassador from Pakistan to the United States. Bill Rajo, senior fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. That both Bill and Hussein have done me the favor of mentioning history. So for those of you who want to know what they're referring to, please consider that Iran is a modern version of what was once known as the Persian Empire, which is a less than modern version of what's known as the Parthian Empire. Now we're back 2,000 years. In 2,000 years, no invader from the West has conquered Parthian Empire, Persian Empire, Iran Empire. No invader from the West. 2,000 years. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for that quick, short history lesson. And part of it is, of course, geography. The mountains in the north protect them from invasion from that side, and the mountains in the east, and that leaves only one side open. And the people can be very deceptive. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Shah's son, who's today on one side, will be on another side 6 months later. It's a very complicated sort of people, and I don't know why. Anyway, this is going to be a bit of a mess, in my opinion. I don't know what Bill thinks.
No, I think so too, John. When you mentioned the 2,000 years, I said, "Wait, what about Alexander?" And then I had to remember Alexander the Great was beyond 2,000 years.
Well, he created the Seleucid Empire, which was the
Right.
first version.
I can remember my history, John.
Yes. And in addition, I mention, because in passing, what we're looking at here is analogies that we can hang on to. So I reviewed Crassus, the richest man in Rome, demonstrating his ability as a general, and his son marching on the Parthian Empire while Caesar was still considering his rebellion in Gaul. And Crassus, the richest man in Rome, crashed against the Parthian horseman who had a composite bow and could shoot from horseback about 3 arrows in 1.5 seconds. And the Roman legions, the 12 cohorted hollowed arrangement that they advanced into battle and defeated everybody they ever came up against eventually, failed to solve the Parthian horsemen. And I'm thinking right now, that's a lesson I'd want for the Pentagon to pay attention to.
Bill, you were very right about the comparison between potential destruction of Hezbollah, which is, such a small country, 5 million people. Shia are about 1.5, of whom only 1/3 probably support Hezbollah. Should have been, you can't do it just by air. And Iran is what, 85 million people, and the land area is just huge.
Right.
I mean, compared to Lebanon. It's about, if I'm not mistaken, more than or close to 650,000 square miles.
The Iranian people have to do this. If they want this, they have to do this. That's all it boils down to me. We can support them.
I remind how both of you are being so discreet in your remarks. Congratulations, because a shorter version of all of this is Trump's war. That's what's happening in London right now, Mr. Ambassador. They're calling it Trump.
Yeah, it's Trump's war. And, there are others who are calling it Trump's folly. But, who knows? Who knows? It might come out very differently. We'll see.
I thank you very much, Hussein. Please
all
stay.
The best. Take care.
We need you next Monday, Hussein. Remember us.
I will be
Be safe, Hussein. Good to see you.
Thank you.
If there's not an air raid signal at that particular moment, I'll be available.
Well, thank you very much. Good
morning. All the best. Bye. Bill,
we did our bit, and now we're moving on to Iran. We're joined by your colleague, Jonathan Saya, who joins us this morning from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Jonathan has been most helpful because he has the language, because he's lived in Tehran, because what he's observing now are the young people of Tehran observing the bombing and missile campaign launched against leadership in Tehran and what is to be done. Jonathan, a very good day to you. Thank you. We'll begin immediately because I believe you have some time pressure. Is that correct, Jonathan?
That is correct. Hi, and it's great to be with you. Very excited to get into some detail with you too.
All right, we'll begin immediately. We have, if I start right now, Jonathan, we finish at 49. How is that for you?
That is excellent. I appreciate you being considerate.
Oh well, Lordy, we gotta pass the hat to get you going because you've got so much information. Good heavens! My first question is going to be what you hear from home, what you hear from your colleagues in the diaspora. Are they gloomy or are they heartened? That's the first question I'm going to ask. Here we go.
So I think.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think one main element for Iranians on the ground is that they cannot lose hope. So if they were to approach this with a lot of nihilism and pessimism, effectively all the blood that was spilled was for nothing. So I think they're still maintaining the momentum on the ground. They're still very hopeful. I do think there are only two things that could really alienate the average Iranian. So, of course, because they see this as an attack against their oppressors, not an attack.
And this is very good stuff. Let's record it. Here we go. 5.
Save it.
4. No, he's bursting, Bill. We're going to turn him loose. So, 5,
Well, we love him.
5, 4, 3. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. Carrot soup. Jonathan's a beautiful carrot. Bill's a beautiful carrot.
Oh, thank you.
I kind of know what I'm doing. So here we go. 5, 4. Live from, I guess we're global, live from global on Substack on StreamYard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. Bill Rajo, Senior Fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He and his colleagues keep the Long Word Journal. Joins me as my co-host and friend, and we're very pleased to welcome Bill's Jonathan Saya, the man at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies who watches Iran, especially Tehran, especially. He's lived there, he has the language, and he has excellent intuition about how the Iranians in country right now, who have been at risk for many years, but certainly many months because of the protest and brutality of the regime, and the Iranians in the diaspora, in Europe, in the United States, around the world, in Australia, all of that. And Jonathan, a very good day to you. It is a hard thing to watch your country attacked repeatedly by the best missiles the United States has ever built and the best Air Force and the best naval power that the U.S. can field out there, again and again attacking your country. What we have right now is some indication that the civilian damage has been minimized, but it is not zero. This is not something where we can say nobody was hurt. A lot of people are being hurt. The global crisis now is economies stumbling to a halt because of oil, because of energy, because of confidence in war fighting. The first thing I'd like to know from you, and then we'll turn to Bill's question, is the diaspora and the young people inside. You watch their communications as best we can. Are they at this point gloomy about what's happened after 9-10 days of war fighting, or are they encouraged? Good day to you, Jonathan.
Good day to you. It's a pleasure to be on. So talking to folks on the ground, and of course, as you pointed out, Iran is a majority young country. So any change in the long term would be initiated by the majority of Iranian who are really young. The momentum still exists on the ground. So I don't know if they perceive this as an attack against the Iranian national identity. I think it is less than ideal to see fighter jets flying over Tehran. But ultimately, by everyone, this is viewed as an attack against the Islamic Republic and not an attack against Iran. Because if you want to talk about an occupation, the mindset on the streets right now is that the country has been occupied for at least 50 years. Some go as far as saying it was occupied for 1,400 years by Islamism. But again, just tells you that any attack against these targets is going to be perceived as liberation. That said, there are things that could alienate the average Iranian, and I'm thinking of two particularly. One any form of spreading, I guess, sectarian values, if they were to be pursuing ethnocentric policies of promoting separatism or really funding terror groups, that would really, on one hand, alienate Iranians. And then close to that is major attacks against infrastructure. So if we were to continue to see all these attacks taking out oil refineries, not oil silos, despite what we saw on media, it is oil refineries, bridges, railroads. Any attack against critical infrastructure would also risk alienating the average Iranian and losing the momentum on the ground.
And by that, you mean, for example, Kharg Island, which is identified as something that the U.S. has not attacked. If Kharg Island was taken offline, that would be profound damage to the economy going forward. Is that correct?
It would be. It would also be seen as redrawing Iran's map. Territorial integrity is very important to Iran's nationalist movement. So we shouldn't just be looking at this in a case of simple regime change and not care what happens after. We do not want to pass on a destroyed country to the new wave of Iranians that are going to assume leadership. We want to at least minimize some of this damage and to an extent ensure that not only are they going to have enough infrastructure to keep life going, they want to ensure that they could actually have a stand-up army as well. So there are a few pillars that we have to keep in mind as we enter week 2 of this campaign.
Bill, you have a question for your colleague.
Yes. Good morning, John. Hope you're well. Interesting comments on the occupation by the regime, the occupation of Iran by the regime. It's a very, very astute way of putting it, I think. John, the Iranian people, I've been beating the drum on this for weeks now. I believe that the only way the regime can truly be overthrown is by the Iranian people themselves. I do believe the U.S. and Israel with airstrikes and other aid can assist this. Are we seeing any evidence of resistance forming, and armed resistance forming, or elements of the security forces being cleaved off by the Iranian opposition?
You're right to point that out, Bill. So even looking at how the president framed this campaign when it was launched, that Washington is here to provide, and Jerusalem, of course, are here to provide the conditions for change. But the final knockout has to come to the Iranian people. And I couldn't agree with you more. So far, we have not seen anything that is because they've been told to stand down. So opposition leader and the president said now is not the time. And they reiterate this message. Because of that, you don't see many Iranians coming out. But that said, that doesn't mean that they're not ready to take on. So on one hand, once you degrade enough of the regime's capabilities, and we can talk about what that looks like, if it's just infrastructure or you need to go after personnel. But once you degrade that and provide a little bit of an avenue for Iranians to rise up, I think the strategy there would be just have the masses counter the few thousand remaining ones. I do think still some of the intelligence services operating in Iran on behalf of the United States and Israel have a few tricks up their sleeves that we haven't known about. I would have to assume, should there be a calls for protest, I would have to assume that there's going to be at least some sort of coordination that would either tell the protesters where to occupy or how to go about it. So that's a bit sensitive. We haven't gotten there yet. But outside of separatist groups, so far, we have not seen an organized opposition that's armed take to the streets yet because of the factors I mentioned.
Iran is a quilt of different ethnic histories. And I'm looking for especially the Azeri, the Baluch, and the Kurds, those three large groups. Have they indicated one way or the other, any one of them, about their thinking about the next day and the next month and the next year, given what's the violence is going on right now?
So far, the only thing has been from Kurdish separatist groups, and that was because of the reports that we heard that they might be trying to arm them or trying to somehow use them as a leverage against the Islamic Republic. Nothing really coming from Azeris or of the Baluch minority. But that said, even when we talk about the Kurdish population, in this particular case, you're talking about a few factions and separatist groups. There has not been an indication that the masses and the 3-4 provinces in Iran that are majority Kurdish necessarily want to pursue this form of sectarian or separatist sentiment. We don't really know that. But that said, it comes down to the people that are holding the weapons. And those ones, at least 5 factions, and of course there's many splinters amongst them, on the Kurdish side have expressed the willingness to initiate separatism. But it's debatable whether they have the really manpower to pose a meaningful threat against the Islamic Republic, because they're really fragmented, they're limited in numbers, they're not really, there's not a cohesive structural command that they could meaningfully counter the Basij or the IRGC ground forces.
Bill, you have a question for John.
John, former Supreme Leader Khamenei and his son has been appointed to take over for his father. He's the new Supreme Leader. What is the importance of this? Do you believe he'll be an effective leader for them? Are you surprised about his selection?
I don't think any of us were surprised. It seemed like it was headed that way because there were no real meaningful contenders. Some of them had already died, and some of them lacked legitimacy, and some of them are not as closely affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. So the son, Moshtaba, he's the only one that fulfilled all this criteria. So no surprises there. I do think it does pose a question of legitimacy amongst officials, that Islamic Republic was not meant to be a hereditary succession, but look where we are right now. That said, as to whether he can be an effective leader or not, the thing about the Islamic Republic's supreme leader is that it's not comparable to other dictators in a sense that he's only part of the pillar. He's not necessarily the defining feature of the Islamic Republic. He's there to coordinate different organizations within the regime that might be competing against each other. He's there to pose as a symbol for the axis of resistance. But more importantly, he's there to give legitimacy to military rule. He's there to give the Islamist blessing to the IRGC so the regime does not overtly look like a military dictatorship for what it actually is. But I think he can fulfill those. Now, whether he's going to be alive in the next week or so, that remains to be seen. But ultimately, it comes down to how the IRGC is going to conduct itself. I wouldn't focus too much about the one figurehead of the Islamic Republic.
I'm John Batchelor. Bill Rajo, my colleague and friend, is a senior fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. We're joined by Bill's colleague, Jonathan Sayeb, looking at the people of Iran, both inside the country and watching from the outside. When we come back, what to anticipate these next days, given the price of oil, given the anxiety everywhere, the G7, Asia, everybody's involved in this, adversaries especially. What is Jonathan watching for from Tehran, the capital? I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my good colleagues, Bill Rajo, senior fellow for the FDD, and his colleague, Jonathan Sayeb. And we're discussing what we can of the fog of war, given the reign of terror these last days for the people in Tehran, especially Tehran, the capital city, not knowing whether the so-called smart weapons are going to continue to work or whether there'll be an errant bomb here or there, a missile that lands in the wrong place. We believe that's already happened. It happens in warfare, which is why this is not a guaranteed victory. This can be a tragedy for people there, in Tehran especially. Jonathan, I come to you about what to watch for in Tehran. What would tell you there's any change? We know that martyrdom is an important institution for the Islamic regime. They're getting lots of martyrs now with the bombing of the police stations and the targeting of the Basij. Let me lay out the civilian guys with guns and what you're watching. Is it the police? Is it the Basij, who are the militia? Is it the regular army? Is it the IRGC? Any one of those you're watching more than the other to see if there's going to be consistency and loyalty. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. You're right to point out that there are different core groups that form the Islamic Republic's military body. So far, there's been unconfirmed reports suggesting that some within the conventional military might be increasingly looking at defections. I don't know if I would characterize the main people involved in some of these organizations any differently. If you've served the Islamic Republic for the last half a century, it doesn't really matter if the name of your group is the Revolutionary Guard Corps or the conventional military or the Basij. They've been aiding the same movement. I think the way to better characterize this is based on ranks. I think foot soldiers from all angles are getting alienated more and more because it seems like commanders are not showing up for their posts. They've either been killed or have been in hiding. So that's, I think, one crucial thing that we need to keep an eye out. as to how that's going to unfold. But what I'm really looking at is the besieged. They're the ones with the squads patrolling the areas. And there were some reports on social media claiming that they were struck. So if there were to really pivot towards these hyper-local attacks against specific units that are driving around Tehran, that signals to us that the war has entered its new phase of going after the personnel as opposed to the infrastructure.
I think we lost John.
I think we did.
I'm here. Bill, do you have a question for Jonathan?
Yes, I do. John, you anticipated my question expertly. The besiege, are they? I assume by what you're saying, they're currently on the streets, still enforcing the will of the regime. Is that correct?
That is correct. The way to characterize this is that the infrastructure has been destroyed. So there are no longer any bases, there are no buildings, there's no physical place that they can congregate at, which is why they're increasingly now, and they don't have missiles to launch anymore either. So these military personnel at this point are now shifting towards the other priority, the only thing they can handle, because they cannot launch drones anymore. What they can do is to repress internally, embed themselves in civilian infrastructure, patrol the areas, terrorize the public, and we certainly still see squads driving around. They fire at buildings that are chanting anti-regime slogans. So yeah, now that they know their military capabilities is degraded, they are also anticipating a form of a ground invasion or something internal, and that's why they're shifting their focus.
For a ground invasion, so that the regime is entertaining the possibility of the U.S. introducing troops the way they did in Iraq. Is that correct? Is that what you mean, Jonathan?
That is part of what I mean. They anticipate anything. And the fact that they don't have a unified command structure anymore, you're talking about mid-level, lower-level officials just acting based on what they've been told. And what they've been told is to have a contingency plan for even if there were to be a ground invasion. That's something they anticipated, probably not the most. Second to external attacks, that's what they thought would happen. And there are already signs suggesting at that. So if your regime officials looking at how Washington is entertaining sending in the Kurds, or you look at what the Crown Prince Pahlavi is saying about asking the masses to rise up, they anticipate that the next wave would be them holding their guns against individuals that they can physically see.
Bill, your thoughts about air power have been very helpful these last days, so I wanted to review them and see if you wanted to update. Air power did not succeed in Afghanistan. Air power did not succeed in Iraq. Air power has not succeeded in Gaza against Hamas. Air power has not succeeded in Lebanon against Hezbollah. Air power did not succeed in Syria during the civil war when the U.S. was not involved and Russia was. It did not succeed. Is there anything about this? And air power did not succeed in Libya. I left out one once upon a time. Is there anything about the present conflict that tells you there'll be a different outcome, that this air power has learned from the past?
I'd like to add Somalia to that list, and Al Qaeda in Pakistan, and we could keep going, John. Air power is a tool. It's one tool in the toolbox. If you rely on it alone, you're destined to fail. We over-relied on air power in all of those theaters, and that's why we essentially failed. This is why I'm asking John about the besiege, right? If they're on the streets and they're driving around in civilian cars, this isn't a problem for American air power. This is a problem for the Iranians in Tehran. They're the only ones who could identify and target in a real time the members of the terror apparatus of the regime. This is why I say we can support these, the Iranians' efforts to overthrow the regime, but the Iranians ultimately themselves, they're the ones that's where the fighting is going to get ugly. I'm shocked that we just haven't seemed to have learned these lessons over time. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe the CIA and Mossad and are organizing the Iranians to take on that phase, arming and organizing them. And certainly with air dominance, we can be dropping in weapons and we could be getting trainers in. But history tells me we're just not very good at this part of the war. And if we think that it's an air power alone issue, and it's the way that this Trump administration tends to speak, it makes me very pessimistic.
And Jonathan, last thoughts, 30 seconds right now. What will you be watching in these next days till we talk to you again about a positive sign for the people of Iran?
Any further strikes that are hyper local, anything that would strike some of these squads, as we talk about, going after these units. And once we see an absolute depletion of Iranian ballistic missiles, that would tell us that it's the new phase. And that's what I'm really personally looking forward to analyzing the most.
Jonathan Sai of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Bill Rajo is a senior fellow at the FDD, Keeping the Long War Journal, where you can see Jonathan's reporting routinely, also at the FDD.org website to stay up to the moment. This is very carefully Fog of War. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you, Jonathan. You're away at 51. I beg pardon.
Oh, no problem. Thank you both, gentlemen, for the great questions.
Have a
Talk
busy
soon.
day. We'll see you next Monday, Jonathan. God
Be
bless.
well,
Certainly will.
John. Catch you soon.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
Talk
both.
to you tomorrow. Yeah.
Good
Talk
hunt. Okay, Bill, despite the fact that I took myself off air for a moment,
I was like, what do I do here? I didn't know. So I guess I got to learn from you. Is it recording in the background? I could have just continued and asked my question.
everything's backed up. It's just
Okay.
that I didn't mean to not be there. So
You know,
I was
it's good
trying
that they
to,
get to see all the little technical challenges.
I was trying to adjust for an excited Springer Spaniel, because no doubt there was another delivery man somewhere over there. And so I thought I'll ride this out and Sailor will quickly tire. Sailor is always anticipating that it's the Amazon man who brings treats. There you have it, Bill. That's what the marking's about.
When I record upstairs where the dog can see everything out the window, I keep a couple of dog bones with me. And if I even get a hint that that dog is going to perk up, I just snap my fingers and put a bone down low. That'll occupy him for 5.
I think Sailor hears the truck. I
Yeah.
think
Oh, no. Listen, my dog, I live on a court. So if it's not the Amazon guy, the trashman, the mailman, or, and I'm on a spot where only my car comes to my house, right?
Right.
My dog knows, he knows what my wife's car is. He knows what my kids' cars look like.
Oh, well, you know that pinging sound when they back those trucks up?
Yep. Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah.
The two of them, Charlie and Sailor, they go straight up from wherever they're lying down, straight up, and immediately run to the windows. Immediately. Back to the war, Bill. I'm trying to be less than dreary, but I see nothing yet that tells me there's an outcome other than Afghanistan and Iraq here.
It's hard I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be open-minded.
Yeah.
The problem is, and some of this could be by design, John, and that, we did get some clarity last week on what the objectives were from Hegseth. And one of the things he said is not regime change. However, that could just be smoke and mirrors. I don't really know, but I don't know what's being done to organize an Iranian resistance. I've been beating that horse dead for months now. That's the important part, right? Like, how can the U.S. Air Force target a civilian car driving through the streets of Tehran with 3 guys with an AK? How do they know you want to cause collateral damage? You want to cause civilian damage? Miss target. I've been on the streets in, Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad, Mosul. I could, tick off all the places in Iraq, and doing that type of work, not killing civilians, is very, very hard work. And this is why I always got frustrated when you would see certain media personalities and news outlets just calling American soldiers killing machines. I was in Ramadi, John, watched, a car was positively identified as having insurgents in it, and they believed the car was a suicide bomber. It was a lime green Opel. And we saw it while we were on patrol. And I'm sitting there wondering why the Marines didn't open fire on it, right? And 2 Marines start chasing it down the street, and ultimately it got away. Like that, it's a complex environment. It's not something you can't win these war via air. How would we have gotten air support up over, in Ramadi at that specific time to target that vehicle? We're not playing Call of Duty. We're not playing, video games. These are very complicated situations.
The targeting packages they've gone through their primaries, and they're now recycling, and they're moving into civilian areas because the regime put a lot of its sensitive infrastructure underneath or inside civilian areas purposefully.
Yeah.
That means that the choices of the early days were good in comparison to the choices they have now.
It's easy to take out the Iranian Navy, a warship, a headquarters, a dock. And now go after a besieged headquarters that's where maybe their main headquarters was destroyed, but they're now embedded in a local school. That's where the war gets hard. It gets hard when it becomes a ground game, and we need to have a ground game.
Is there any indication that this Pentagon, this administration took into account what we've been reporting for 25 years? Where, Bill? Show me where they said, oh, yeah, that doesn't work.
I haven't seen that level of introspection. Again, most of the people I speak to are the guys that are grinding it out, and they get it. But I think and this is not just for this administration, it was really bad under the Obama administration. As the information trickles upwards, politics overtakes good policy. I fear that again, John, without really truly knowing the objectives, is this war to overthrow the regime? If so, they didn't take this all into account. Is it to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities, its ballistic missile capabilities, to decimate its leadership, basically break the Iranian military regime, but allow it to remain intact? If that's the actual objective, set them back 5, 10, 15 years. If that was the objective of this, that could be achieved. I don't really know what their objective is here.
Neither do I, Bill, which is not a good start. In
Right.
addition, as you speak, I'm thinking, if I'm in the Kremlin or I'm in the Forbidden City, I'm smiling.
Yeah. I mean, look, this helps Ukraine, Russia in Ukraine. This helps
Right.
China if it really is serious about invading Taiwan. The depletion of our capabilities, our weapons systems, the missiles and whatnot affects both theaters. I'm a believer that this regime needs to go, but if we're going to do it, we need to do it right.
Bill Rajo is a senior fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He keeps the Long War Journal. I highly recommend following it very carefully. There are more theaters than we're able to address in our conversation this morning. For example, we've been waiting for a report from Africa for some time from our colleague Caleb Weiss, because the whole world is watching. It is not silos of warfare. It is integrated teams. What happens in East Africa, what happens in West Africa, what happens in the Gulf, all of that, recruiting, money flow, confidence, and especially the future, the vision that the jihadists have and their sponsors, Iran being a major sponsor. They're all watching what we're talking about. And as of right now, I do not generalize, but I would say it's difficult to present this as a success after a week of high-end warfare, very high-end, satellites, drones, stealth aircraft, cruise missiles, submarine gunboats, all of that. The best there is to take the Martians on. And we're fighting something that is not capable of defending itself, and we're not winning. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. I thank you very much. Thanks, Bill. We'll talk again soon enough.
Always a pleasure, John.
We meet at 11 for the Hezbollah report. Thanks, Bill.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Here comes the music.